Hi, I'm Richard Patterson and I'm a drum teacher at the Institute for Contemporary Music Performance in London. Over the next few months we're going to be looking at the idea of ergonomics in drumming. Now what ergonomics is the concept of the relationship between you and your equipment at work, the equipment you work with. Now this is very relevant to drumming because it's such a physically involved occupation. All limbs are at work, there's a lot of balance issues, lots of muscle groups at work. Injury is a high risk, and also fatigue definitely is a big problem for drummers. So we're going to look at making sure that you're not doing anything which is hindering your playing, which is hindering your creativity and your technique when you play. Now this alone won't make you a brilliant drummer. You still need to practice all those technique exercises that you'll be looking at. But the idea here is that you're not doing anything that will get in the way of that and stop you coming up with great ideas on the kit. Okay, so the first thing we're going to start with today is looking at how you're sitting, possibly massively overlooked. Because the way we sit at the drum kit is the ideal starting point to then build the drum kit around you. Now that's one of the most important concepts with ergonomics. You should adjust the drum kit to you and never adjust yourself to the drum kit. First we'll look at sitting, and I'll show you what can happen if you sit too low or too high. Okay, so here you can see I'm sitting too low. My knees are actually a little bit higher than my hips, and that means that my legs aren't really doing much to support me. I'm having to curl my back to compensate for that, so straight away my posture is compromised, and that means that muscles are actually doing much more work in my posture than they need to be, because if my back is straight, then really the muscles don't need to do much at all and we can relax up here. But I'm having to curl up with my knees above, which is really feels already that I'm going to be restricted playing the pedals too. If you're playing a normal groove like this sort of thing, let's say like just a big punky groove, then you will be holding your arm up for a lot more of the gig than you really need to. You'll be holding this tension in your shoulder, maybe in your back, elbow really high for long periods of time, so try and avoid sitting this low. Now you can see I'm sitting quite high. There's an angle much greater than 90 degrees in my knee and in my hip. Now that can lead, my pelvis is having to rock forward a little bit, which would mean that the top of my back, even my head might start to have to arch back to compensate for the lack of support I'm now getting from my legs. Also, the stool can be cutting into the underside of your thighs quite a lot, which sometimes can actually restrict blood flow to your feet. And if you're playing something quite fast, they need the oxygen to get down there, so that's not helping your legs out at all. This is most common, I see, with people trying to get a very flat surface of different sounds up here. So you can see now, because I'm sat so high, the bass drum isn't really in charge of where this tom goes. So I can almost get the snare and the tom and the floor tom at the same height, which makes it really easy to whiz around, say if you're playing a linear fill like this. It's really effortless just to move around the toms up here, but what you're losing out on is stability, and in a long gig you'll really feel that. Okay, now I am at my most natural sitting height. This for me is my optimum sitting height. I've got around 90 degrees in my knee joint, in my hip joint, and my legs are just, I'm sitting and my legs are at just the right angles to provide enough support for my torso when I play. So in a relaxed position, or when I'm playing, my torso shouldn't be moving around too much. If you consider playing something like a Brazilian foot ostinato, where both feet are lifting up and down, the worst thing would be to have that throwing your upper body all over the place, because then if you're wanting to move around the kit at the same time, that's really going to get in the way of your kit mobility. But if you can hold that together and then keep your torso straight, then what your feet are doing won't interfere with your upper body too much. So experiment with your sitting height. You'll find the optimum height for your playing, for your body proportions, From there you can start to build the rest of the kit around you. Remember, it's important that you're at a good sitting height because it will protect your back, and also it will help you balance when you play, which means it won't interfere with what your feet are doing, and it won't interfere with your mobility around the kit either. Now that you've found your optimum sitting height, let's look at the way the feet fall and how you might set up your pedals, your bass drum, your hi-hat. If you just let your feet fall in front of you, don't actually move them into any particular position, just where they want to be, you'll see that we get this V shape, okay? Especially if there's a snare drum between your legs. But what I've noticed is drummers try and set their kit up so that both their bass drum and their shoulders are square onto their audience. Now, if I follow this V-shape rule, from where I'm sitting, my audience will be there, but the bass drum is pointing about 45 degrees to the right. Now, if I square my bass drum up to the audience, I'll have to twist to the right. And if I'm twisting my back through the entire gig, then there's going to be tension held in those muscles, which will lead to wasted energy or even painful injury. Or I might be twisting further down. I might be twisting, if I sit a little bit to the side, I might have to find myself twisting my ankle to play the kick drum, or even having my foot lined across the pedal. Either way, that's going to hinder my bass drum technique. So when you set up, think about this V shape, think about where your audience needs to be, and try maybe moving your bass drum to the right a little bit. If you consider double bass drum players, you never see them put both bass drums square onto their audience. They always have each bass drum pointing outwards, following this line, this V shape that is created by the legs. So try that with your setup, see if it helps out with the bass drum technique at all, and see if it helps you get through a gig without feeling any back pain or anything like that. Okay, so installment 1, we've found a good height to sit at, and you've also looked at how you've positioned your pedals, maybe your kick drum, your hi-hat, your double bass if you use a double bass. Now this might actually prompt a review of how you set up your toms and cymbals as well. We'll look more into that in next month's installment when we look at grip and how that will influence how you set up your drum kit too.